Well, today we're going to see the next step in the conquering of Judah by King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon. And I said yesterday was kind of a gentle, or I forget the exact word I used, but we'll say a gentle explanation. Today is not. Today is a pretty intense explanation, and I think maybe I should actually add listener discretion is advised. This is not a bedtime story. Oh, anything in the Bible you can read to your children. That would be good. Don't believe that. And this would be a classic example. This is a very violent explanation of what happens. It's from 2 Kings. We're in the 25th chapter with the last chapter of 2 Kings, which means obviously we're going to continue on Monday. Monday's unique, by the way. It's the solemnity of Saints Peter and Paul, so we're going to be looking at the Acts of the Apostles. But then we go into Amos, and Amos is a rather fascinating book, and we'll be in Amos for 3 of the 5 days next week, and then we get into St. Thomas on Friday. So St. Peter and Paul on Monday, and we're going to be looking at the Acts of the Apostles, and then Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, we're going to be looking at the book of Amos. Fascinating book, by the way. And then on Friday, our first reading on the feast of St. Thomas the Apostle is from Ephesians. So it'll be interesting variety next week, but we're focusing this week. This is the end of the books of Kings, and this is the end of the second book of Kings. And I'm going to read through the passage, but do keep in mind, viewer or listener discretion is advised. Towards the end of it, it gets very, very graphic. In the 10th month of the 9th year of Zedekiah's reign, remember who Zedekiah was? Zedekiah was the one who Nebuchadnezzar put in place when he deposed Jehoiakim, and in that Zedekiah was the name that Mattaniah took. That was his name, who took Jehoiakim's place. Mattaniah took, and then he took the name Zedekiah, and Mattaniah was Jehoiakim's uncle. So we're kind of looking at this, and we see a little betrayal and all the other stuff. So now it's the 10th month of the 9th year of Zedekiah's reign. Remember who Nebuchadnezzar put in his place. And Nebuchadnezzar's king of Babylon and his whole army advanced against Jerusalem and camped around it, built siege walls on every side. The siege of the city continued until the 11th year of Zedekiah, so we're talking 2 years. On the 9th of the month, when famine had gripped the city, because what have they done? They've formed a blockade, and now no food is going in, no food is going out, and the people of the land had no more food. The city walls were breached. That night, all the soldiers came to the gate between the 2 walls near the king's garden. The Chaldeans had the city surrounded, while the king went toward the Arabah. But the Chaldean army pursued the king and overtook him in the desert near Jericho, abandoned by his whole army. This is, again, not Zedekiah. This is not Nebuchadnezzar, rather. This is Zedekiah. The king was therefore arrested and brought to Riblah to the king of Babylon, who pronounced sentence on him. Now we're getting a little bit on the graphic side, so if you don't want to listen to this, maybe fast forward a bit. They slew Zedekiah's sons before his eyes, then they put out his eyes, bound him with fetters, and brought him to Babylon. You think ISIS is less graphic than these people? No, it's roughly about the same. Pretty nasty people. On the 7th day of the 5th month, this was the 19th year of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, Nebuzaradan, let me do that again, Nebuzaradan, captain of the bodyguard, came to Jerusalem as the agent of the king of Babylon. He burnt the house of the Lord, the house of the king, and all the houses of Jerusalem, every noble house. Now understand what that means. The temple is destroyed. This is one of the 2 times the temple is destroyed, and it was rebuilt once. It hasn't been rebuilt a second time. So the second time was destroyed under the Romans. It has never been rebuilt, and right now it cannot be rebuilt. So when you look at that, we can go back to the Dome of the Rock, which is the big dome in Jerusalem that sits on what was the Temple Mount, which was rebuilt by Cyrus the Persian et al. And after the Judah returned to Judah from being in the Babylonian exile, and the reason why it was rebuilt because of this scene right here. So you can look at that Dome of the Rock in Jerusalem, and you can connect it right all the way back to the reading we're looking at today, that whole scenario. So he burned the house of the Lord, the house of the king, and all the houses of Jerusalem, every noble house. He destroyed them by fire. The Chaldean troops who were with the captain of the guard tore down the walls that surrounded Jerusalem, and Nebuzaradan, captain of the guard, led into exile the last of the army remaining in the city, and those who had deserted to the king of Babylon, and the last of the commoners. So, there you have total devastation. Remember, this is allowed by God. Why? Because they practiced idolatry. So, what happens is, as we see, captain of the guard comes and he leads into exile the army that was still faithful, the army that abandoned the king, and the last of the commoners. The only people left to remain in Jerusalem until the return of the Jews under Cyrus the Persian in somewhere around 40 more years. Some of the country's poor, the captain of the guard left behind as vine dressers and farmers. Total, complete devastation. This is what happened, and this is, as I said, pretty much the end of the book of Kings. Why? Because the people were not faithful to the Lord. That's so important to understand that. The people were not faithful to the Lord. And so, and remember, it wasn't like they didn't go to church on Sunday, which obviously we're talking about a different dynamic. It wasn't that they missed a mass once a month. These people were actively engaged in idolatry. And if they abandoned the Lord as a society, you and I probably wouldn't be alive today. Because remember, all of this is about a passage of time, and in this passage of time, there are developments that happen that ultimately led to the birth of Jesus, and all this passage of time still continues and ultimately will lead to the next step, which is the return of Jesus and the fulfillment of salvation history. So you can see the importance. Now, if we go back to that and we see how serious God took faithfulness to him, well, how serious does he take faithfulness to him today? How serious does he take that we help people understand to live the gospel? And I'm not talking what you see on YouTube. You know that. You know, I throw that stuff away. I was listening to, for just a couple minutes, and a couple minutes more than I should have, a seminary professor, I'm not going to say the name of the seminary, he's teaching all about, always working and being focused on saving your soul. Well, where does that have you focused? It have you focused on yourself. And of course, avoiding sin, where does it have you focused? It has you focused on yourself. What is it the Lord called us to do? Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. Now, nothing wrong with being a seminary professor, obviously. That'd be very fine. He's probably a wonderful teacher. But remember, seminary professors live in the seminary. they don't work in parishes. And because they don't work in parishes, they don't understand parish life. In many cases, some of them do, but the vast majority don't. So parish life is very real, where you deal with real issues. You deal with what you do, which in the seminary you don't have to do. So as he is teaching you to be focused on saving your soul, he doesn't understand the real world that parish priests deal with all the time. How do you deal with real issues, and and then obviously the other thing about how the sacraments really work. I dealt with someone recently who had a relative who died, and said, my relative received the sacrament of the sick before she died. I know she's in heaven. That's the whole point of the sacrament. But if you don't work in ministry, you don't deal with that on a regular basis. And this is the important thing. So you may learn the doctrine, you may learn all the teaching and everything else, but you don't put it into practice, which is what we're called to do. So keep that in mind. Always keep that in mind. The people who are on YouTube teaching, virtually none of them have an active ministry in a parish, including the priest. So do understand that. You need that to really get a deeper understanding of the Lord working in people's lives, which, by the way, I do have an active ministry, just to let you know. But in the meantime, we're going to take a quick break. You're listening to the Catholic Audio Media Podcast. We're here every single Monday through Friday. And subscribe, like, and pass the word. We'll be right back right after this. Have you ever wanted to read the Bible but didn't know which readings to check out? Well, how about looking at the Church's daily readings? You can find them at the website of the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops. Just go to bible.usccb.org and click on the date that pops up on that page. There are other options on that page as well. That is bible.usccb.org, and click on the date and you will see the daily readings for your own prayer and study of the Bible. This is a prayerful tip from St. Anthony Parish in Allston, Massachusetts. Don't forget to subscribe to us on Patreon. Patreon.com/Catholic Audio Media. Patreon.com/Catholic Audio Media. Check us out. Check what we have to offer. Previews of upcoming podcasts. Previews of upcoming columns over at catholicaudiomedia.substack.com. Your ability to comment, make suggestions, even make suggestions in upcoming programs. Check us out. Patreon.com, Catholic Audio Media. We had an interesting tweet put out by Pontifex. In case you didn't know, Pontifex is, that's Pope Leo XIV. And Pontifex is always the Pope's tweet. And it's in different languages, but it's Pope's tweet. So during Francis's time, obviously, he was still Pontifex, but it was Francis. So I wanted to read something to you, and what's fascinating is the responses. So let's look at that. It is important to resist the commodification of basic human needs. What that means is to turn them into a commodity. Food, water, and healthcare cannot be subordinated to market considerations or geopolitical interests. Access to adequate food is a fundamental human right grounded in the dignity of every person. Meeting this need not only alleviates suffering, but also addresses underlying causes of geopolitical instability. Indeed, food security is an essential component of global and integral security. And he continues, I wish to appeal to the governments and peoples of the world to renew and strengthen their commitment to increase the resources dedicated to combating hunger and its root causes, and to remove the obstacles that prevent aid from reaching those in need. At the same time, such support should also strengthen engagement with the Church and civil society. Reinforcing the capacities of all these actors together will multiply our collective effectiveness in the fight against hunger. And I was fascinated by some of the responses, because they're not good, and they really reflect a very sad understanding of what it means to be a Christian. I think most of these are probably from the U.S. So some of the things, one of the things that came up a lot, and this is from, I'm not going to say his name because it really can't be pronounced. I have a feeling that he is from Oh, I guess he's British. That's the flag of England? I didn't know that. Anyway, read your Bible, Pope. Those who do not work to provide for their families are lower than unbelievers. And of course, he's using the New King James Version. And he's talking about 1 Timothy 5-8. So we're going to bring that up, and you're going to understand that, but you're also going to understand how absolutely incorrect that is, because what they bring out is this understanding that is misplaced, but they're talking about the Pope and saying the Pope is wrong. So this is 1 Timothy 5:8, and it is, and again, this I'm reading from the Catholic Public Domain Version. But if anyone has no concern for his own, especially for those of his own household, he has denied the faith, and he is worse than an unbeliever. And concern also in other versions known as provide for. And others bring up 2 Thessalonians 3:10. For even when we were with you, we gave you this command: if anyone will not work, let him not eat. So they're going after the Pope on this. But let's take a look at St. James. And St. James comes up with a rather interesting line. So let's go to that. And it is in chapter 2, and it is verse 16. So if a brother or sister is naked and daily in need of food, and if any one of you were to say to them, go in peace, keep warm and nourished, and yet not give them the things that are necessary for the body, of what benefit is this? And that's literally what the Pope is saying, but people aren't quoting this. Oh, he would not work, should not eat. Now, if you're going to follow that teaching, then if someone comes to you and they're looking for a job and you can hire them, what excuse do you have for not hiring them? Well, this guy was in prison. Wait a minute. That's your excuse. So now when he's not working because you won't hire him, and you can turn around and call him a lazy bum because you won't hire him because he was in prison, or because he wasn't in prison. Remember, the worst thing that can happen is what is known as nul pros. That's if someone is arrested, they're arraigned, and then the district attorney or the prosecutor chooses not to prosecute. It's still on their record, but they can't resolve it. It's called nul pros. It's the worst thing that can happen. So there we go. Pope Leo is talking about, look, we have to have resources for people who can get, food, clothing, and shelter. And people who say, well, he who does not work should not eat, are not there saying, well, what do we do about people who need to work and no one will give them a job? And there it is. That's the reality. Or there isn't enough work in a particular country, or, the reality of unemployment is a very serious problem, and it's a reality in some other countries. I mean, this is one of the things we're looking at in this country, whereas if you heard the Catholic audio media weekend program we did a week ago Saturday, 2 weeks from this coming Saturday, 2 weeks from tomorrow, actually, 2 weeks ago tomorrow, you'll learn that through AI, they're expecting 300 million people to lose their job over 10 years or less. Well, that's the population of the United States now. And granted, that's worldwide, but that's the population of the United States now. Who's going to supply their food, especially if your people turn around and say, if it says in the Bible, those who do not work should not eat. Well, what are you going to do for the people who have no work and they can't find work? It's not because they can't find a job they won't take a job that's beneath them. It's because no one will hire them. What are you going to do about that? And this is what the Pope is talking about. So it's really fascinating to see this very simplistic answer. It's disturbing as well, because that's one of the issues that you see in our country right now. I can tell you that there are people that are looking for work, but they can't. Either they won't be hired, or they're also taking care of children, and their own children, and they have to do that as well, and because of that, they can't work the regular hours. And people will say, well, then they should not eat. Well, really? They are working, they're helping other people work, but they're not getting paid for what they do. Do you see what I'm saying? So that attitude the Pope brings up is right, and this very, very callous attitude and response is wrong. And this is one of the things the Pope brings up, which is also important. And, you got all these people who, again, don't have a clue, and they got all upset. And what they're saying is, what the Pope said is there are more serious sins than sexual sins. Now, understand what he said. That doesn't mean those aren't serious sins, but there are other more serious sins. And as St. James says, goodbye and good luck, keep warm, well fed, see you later, can't do anything for you, goodbye, is a sin as well. And it's a serious sin. Any form of injustice is a serious sin. Any form of corruption is a serious sin. Any form of perjury is a serious sin. And we see all that and all the great damage it does, because the commandment is to love God and love neighbor. And if you're not doing that and get involved in corruption and all the other stuff, then you are committing serious sins. And remember that adage from, I think it was Fulton Sheen. In many Catholic homes, and I don't remember the exact line, so I kind of fill it in myself. Guy can leave work early, which is considered stealing, by the way. Leave work early, go to a bar, get drunk, get into a fight, drive home drunk, and as long as he didn't get into bed with anyone but his sacramentally married wife, he didn't commit any sins. That's the attitude that is wrong. It doesn't mean that sexual sins are not serious, but what it does mean is there are other serious sins. And if you only focus on one, then you're going to be engaged in all kinds of sin and say, oh, I don't commit any sin. Yeah, you do. And a lot of it has to do with acting unjustly. And when you act unjustly, that is an evil act to do. When you act unjustly, that's a sinful act. So we're kind of looking at that, what the Pope said. We're looking at these responses, people who obviously don't know their Bible well. And don't forget, for some people, they discount the letter of James because they believe that Martin Luther considered it a straw epistle because Martin Luther said faith without works is dead. But it's not a straw epistle. It's a very strong epistle, and it's a very strong message. We're going to be back right after this. You're listening to the Catholic Audio Media Podcast. Did you know that Catholic TV offers free apps for both Android and iOS users? Visit the website catholictv.com or your app store to download this faith resource to your device. Don't forget to subscribe to us on Patreon. Patreon.com/Catholic Audio Media. Patreon.com/Catholic Audio Media. Check us out. Check what we have to offer. Previews of upcoming podcasts. Previews of upcoming columns over at catholicaudiomedia.substack.com. Your ability to comment, make suggestions, even make suggestions in upcoming programs. Check us out. Patreon.com, Catholic Audio Media. We're back. So Monday, we're going to be looking at the solemnity of Saints Peter and Paul. We're going to be looking at the Acts of the Apostles from that time, for that day. And then we're going to go into the book of Amos, as I was saying at the beginning of the Mass on Tuesday, Wednesday, beginning of the program on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. So don't forget, this is coming up to the 13th week of Ordinary Time. We have roughly 2/3, so it's about 26. It's actually about 24 more weeks, if I get this right. 21 more weeks left of Ordinary Time. That'll bring us to just after Thanksgiving, but we don't have to worry about that right now. In the meantime, have yourself a blessed day, and we will see you on Monday.
Yeah, you know the real is back. Father Carr Chaplain from the city of champions, dropping daily reflections coming straight from the field. The raw truth revealed for the strong-willed. It's the Greatest Act of Defiance podcast with your host Father Carr, a message built to last. The Greatest Act of Defiance podcast. That's right, the Greatest Act of Defiance.
The Catholic teaching in this podcast is reflected and presented as accurately as possible. The opinions expressed are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect those of the Archdiocese of Boston or any other institution.